Okay, so recording has started again. I suppose I should do the intro again. I'll do the intro a little bit better this time. I thought that was not good.
Hey, first time is practice, right?
It was a test run. Yes, of course it was. So, what's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Seasonal Podcast, where this time I'm sort of revitalizing this sort of series where instead of being joined by my best friend in, the town that I live, Lane, for the first 9 episodes that were on my main channel, I'm doing this as a discussion series for the new Zelda game that has come out with my best friend online, being Josh. Say hello, Josh.
Hello, YouTube.
And his audio is actually being recorded this time. I goofed up for the first time. Yeah, this is our second attempt. We only got like 4 minutes into the other one, so we're fine.
Yeah, we fixed it early.
yeah. Like I said, in the very intro of this, we are doing a discussion, essentially first impressions, mostly discussing the tutorial of Tears of the Kingdom, the new Zelda game. I do actually want to get this out right at the beginning of this. This will go into all of the spoilers of everything that we have played thus far, so pretty much between 9 and 20 hours into the game. If you haven't played through the tutorial, don't watch this video. If you've played past the tutorial, you'll be fine, most likely. Like
there'll be gameplay spoilers. It's not really going to be any story spoilers. I have a couple memories, but
yeah. We might mention stuff from past games, but we're not concerned about that.
There might be story spoilers from past games, but not from Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, and even if we do, it won't be anything past the tutorial or what's in the introduction anyway. Right. So if you've played through the whole tutorial level, which for the record is the Great Sky Island, once you've left the Great Sky Island for the first time, you're pretty much fine here. Like, we're not going to go into anything too much because that's all we've played. So how much have we played? I've played about 9 hours of the game. Josh has played, what'd you say, 20 hours?
But yeah, give or take, probably about 20 hours.
And that's just in the new game. And in terms of our history, this discussion is going to be a little bit unique in the sense that I'm a new fan of Zelda, whereas Josh is a little bit longer time fan. I've only played Breath of the Wild prior to Tears of the Kingdom. That's the only Zelda game I've experienced so far.
Yeah, I've been a Zelda fan for almost my entire life, and it's always been my favorite series. I've played every 3D Zelda. I've played several, probably I think 3 or 4 of the 2D Zeldas.
And also, I suppose we can mention this, if we can get our connections and my internet and stuff to work, we might do some of the Nintendo Switch online stuff for some of the older Zelda games, particularly the first few of them, like Link to the Past or the very first Zelda game maybe, and then of course the popular 3D ones that are on the N64. So.
Yeah, and if his connection then just won't work, he can always stream it to me as a last resort.
Yeah,
because I think for it would be really good to go through the 3D Zelda with somebody who's gone through them already.
Especially as somebody who I'm younger than Josh is, but I also have less experience with gaming in general. I didn't actually start doing any gaming until I was comparatively older. My first console was a Wii. We had a couple games on an Xbox 360. But beyond that, basically everything we played was like a handful of Wii games, and then we haven't really had anything else. So like Wii U, a little bit on Xbox 360, and then personally, from 2018 to the present, I, got Switch, PS4, PS5, PC, all of the other stuff. But I have a lot less gaming experience in general, so I've not played very many games.
I've been playing video games since I was about 6 years old. First console was my N64. My first Zelda was Ocarina of Time, unless I'm remembering incorrectly.
I mean, that's a pretty banger game to have for your first Zelda. If
if
everybody's to be believed, which I'm inclined to believe them.
It's between not including Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. The best 3D Zelda is kind of a toss up between Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess takes a lot of things from Ocarina of Time. It borrows a lot.
I'm trying to think
which is good.
Trying to think of what I've heard from other people, like whether they enjoy Twilight Princess that much. I wonder if Wind Waker might be technically more not necessarily popular, but more beloved than Twilight Princess amongst fans. Maybe because it
Probably.
hasn't
I
aged as
think,
poorly in terms of the art.
yeah, I mean, Wind Waker, in terms of the art style, is pretty much timeless. Twilight Princess, I mean, even the HD remaster on Wii U, I mean, it's you know, it doesn't look bad, but it's hasn't aged as well as Wind Waker, and plus the start is really slow. It takes a couple hours to get going.
And where art style is concerned, I feel like that's kind of a strange thing about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, because they're kind of right in that middle zone between having
Yeah,
an ageless type of art style, but not being so stylized as, say, Wind Waker
right.
was.
They're a lot more realistic than say Wind Waker, but they still have that cell shading of Wind Waker. It's kind of a balance, kind of a a middle ground. Kind of same thing with Skyward Sword.
I feel like it was pretty genius for Nintendo to do it that way as well, because these games don't, like, in terms of their graphic fidelity, they're far from the best, but they still look very beautiful while being able to be massive, have huge draw distances, all of this complex game stuff, and still be able to run on the Switch somehow.
Right.
The fact that
Yeah, I
Tears
mean,
of the Kingdom runs
it's
on the
really
Switch
more about, it's really not so much about the polygon count, and it's really more about the art style that makes some of these games like Wind Waker, for example, timeless.
Yeah, and I mean that's why part of why I loved Breath of the Wild so much was because it looked nice, as particularly playing in handheld, because I did record my first 9 hours of Tears of the Kingdom, basically getting through all the early stuff, but I see myself playing a not insignificant amount of this undocked versus literally everything else I play, I record. So part of that's kind of the nostalgia, because I played Breath of the Wild that way.
I have yet to play the game undocked, and that's just because I just prefer my games on a bigger screen as someone who needs reading glasses.
Oh, true. That is a factor. I mean, I'm blind, but not that kind of way. I just have.
Yeah, I mean, Breath of the Wild
here,
wasn't
I'm
hard
fine.
to see undocked. Breath of the Wild wasn't hard to see in handheld, but I mean, the UI isn't the biggest. So
that's true. And part of it was also getting used to it. I want to know, when you started Tears of the Kingdom, how long did it take for you to get used to the control scheme again?
Not that long. I mean, because I had been playing Breath of the Wild in master mode for like 1 or 2 days.
Oh, gotcha.
Last week, just to kind of get the grips with it. Again.
That makes sense, because prior to my starting this, so for the record, we are recording this on Monday, May 15th, so just 3 days after the game has released. Josh started playing it as soon as he got home from work on Friday, right?
Friday.
Meanwhile, I was at work most of the day on Friday, so I didn't even come home to get the game until after work, which was late. And then instead of starting on Saturday, I was finishing my replay of Jedi Fallen Order, because I knew that if I didn't finish that replay, I would never do it, and I wanted that footage. So I did that first, and then yesterday on Sunday was when I actually started playing. Let me tell you what, it took me at least an hour and a half before I stopped fumbling the controls. It took me so long. It's funny.
I mean, my biggest issue, and like I've been seeing everybody on Twitter say this too, so it's not just me, is that I keep opening the material menu when I mean to open the rune menu by accident, because they switched it to L. So I'm like, I gotta get used to that.
That makes sense. But since I hadn't played Breath of the Wild in a while, I didn't do that.
You didn't have that muscle memory.
What I instead do, actually, when I want to open the rune menu, is I keep on pressing the right and opening the weapon menu. For whatever reason, I keep on thinking everything I hold right on the D-pad and it will open the menu I want. It'll read my mind, but no.
Yeah, the rune menu, it's really nice that it's a radial now instead of another horizontal menu. The only thing I don't like about it is that it like actually uses the rune when you select it instead of just selecting it. So like I can't switch to a rune and just not use it. Like, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it, because I was actually doing something yesterday while I was playing where I had something going in reverse, right? And then when I was going to
recall.
Yeah, or recall, when I was holding the rune menu to switch to the Ultra Hand, the recall just stopped, because if you click the left bumper button, it stops the recall.
Right.
Which is kind of weird, but that's just It's fine. It was just
Yeah,
the fact that
I've
the control
seen.
scheme is so different from every other game.
Yeah, I've seen like on Twitter and stuff, people like making these like crazy like contraptions to like, you know, quote unquote break the game. Like they'll make like put like 10 or 15 logs like end to end together and like make these like huge towers to like get really high. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand how to do that. Like I'm still kind of like really figuring out the ins and outs of especially Ultra Hand. Not so much Fuse because like Fuse it's like more kind of figuring out like what's good in terms of like utility. Because with weapons, it's mostly just, you know, attach a horn pretty
Yeah.
much and you're good. With stuff like shields, um, and you know bows, it's really more about that utility with what you're gonna fuse to your weapons.
Yeah, with shields, I like using the flame emitters.
Yeah, that's something I haven't done
That's
yet.
probably
I
the
just
best thing to do with the shield, to be honest. It's just so
yeah,
useful.
yeah. I've only been sticking my flame emitters to my swords.
Yeah, I haven't
I mean,
used.
which is still good, but it's probably better as a shield because it's probably a constant flamethrower.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you're holding up the guard or the focus button, then
Right.
it acts as a flamethrower. It's great. But
Mhm.
the weird thing about it is, I actually haven't used fuse with any like monster parts or anything like that yet.
Yeah. So that's kind of one of the things that changed about the weapons is that like monsters don't drop their own like specific weapon types, like you know, Boko clubs, Moblin clubs, that kind of thing. Um, you know, Lizel boomerangs, that kind of thing. They kind of drop like more basic weapons, like you know, kind of like sticks, sturdy sticks. I think they upgraded throughout the game, just like weapons from the original do, but they're more basic, um, because you're intended to fuse them.
Yeah, and in a way, I'm not sure how much I like that. Just because for whatever reason, it doesn't click naturally in my head. Like I
Mhm.
don't immediately think of doing that. Whenever I see, it's like there's rocks everywhere. If you walk
Right,
anywhere in this game, there's
right.
15,000 rocks that you're capable of picking up. It's so that you can fuse them, and it's like,
Yeah.
eh,
And the thing is, you basically have to have a sledgehammer, which is you know just a stick and a rock or a boulder slapped onto it because um, you know you have to be able to hit your way through sediment and caves and stuff.
yeah. I mean, I actually like that. Instead of using bombs and having to fiddle with throwing them and then blowing them up and stuff. Like if there's
Well, I
anything
mean,
that you can break.
you may have figured this out yet, but bomb arrows don't exist. You have to attach a bomb flower to
Yeah,
your arrow.
yeah. I discovered that part.
Right.
Um,
Same thing with elemental arrows. They don't exist either. You have to just attach materials.
which is cool, but at the same time,
I
it
like that. I
incentivizes
like that.
exploration
I like
in a
the
way.
system. I just wish we had options. Is one thing I don't like. Like it sucks they don't give us an option to like actually use elemental arrows as opposed to using an arrow and a material.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, but at the same time, it also means that you're not being given a disproportionate amount of any particular type of arrow or being bombarded with a bunch of arrow drops. Rather, every single arrow you find is just an arrow, and then you just have to
Right.
find the parts. In a way, it's a little bit more efficient because I already have like 200 arrows in my stockpile versus Breath of the Wild where I never had enough arrows for anything, period,
Right.
regardless of what type I wanted or needed. Like in the end game when I was just, cleaning up stuff for my 100% back a few years ago, most of what I was doing with my rupees and with my gems and stuff was selling them so that I could have rupees to buy arrows.
Right. Yeah. But when I got off the plateau, I was good on arrows. Had about 100, but now since then I've kind of been struggling to kind of keep my supply topped up.
I haven't used a whole lot of arrows actually. I've only used them for like the bigger monsters and used like bomb flowers and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just
Bomb flowers is another thing that I've been kind of running low on. I keep having to go back to the depths and get more bomb flowers.
yeah, I discovered
That's
that when
because
I went down there. That there's a
yeah,
lot of
that's
bomb flower stuff down there, and I'm
that's
like,
because
ooh,
I've
okay.
been running into some enemies that I need to use bomb flowers to kill.
Yeah, I feel like anything that isn't just basic, bog goblins are
Right.
just have too much health. It seems like the weapon durability is lower than it was in Breath of the Wild, and that's slightly irritating.
I think that's on purpose because I think when you fuse something, it adds durability.
Yes, but even then, like the lower power durabilities, if you're using lower strength weapons, the durability still doesn't last long at all. Seems only like the bigger weapons have great durability. Of course, I still have to explore and, you know, adventure and do more stuff with more of the weapons to know for sure.
I mean, as you get higher tier weapons, I mean, they get more durable. I mean, it's just like Breath of the Wild in that sense.
Yeah, and
like plus the like I was mentioning before, like with the sticks that you get from like enemy drops, you'll eventually get like sturdy sticks. It's like the kind of the next level up.
Yeah.
And those have more durability.
Yeah, and then there will be the bigger size ones and everything.
Probably. There's probably like a third tier, I guess.
What is really nice though is with being able to fuse weapons is being able to just fuse axes. That's really nice.
It's nice, but at the same time, like I have trouble finding those like triangular rocks that you need to use to make them, like because they're only like in specific places. They're not like rocks where they're everywhere. Like,
yeah,
they're a little harder to find.
They're a little harder to find, but I come across them enough that I notice them where it's like, oh, okay, well, if I didn't have 3 axes already in my inventory, that's there.
Right. Yeah. I try to always have like the utility weapons on me, like a Korok leaf, an axe, a hammer, just so I have them at all times.
Yeah. Yeah. And
which sucks because inventory is low right now, and I haven't
inventory is so low. Like every single time I go anywhere, just into any dungeon, if there's a weapon in a chest or anything, I don't have the inventory for it, and it's irritating me.
Yeah, I need to find Hestu either like today or tomorrow.
Something, so yeah. How many Korok seeds do you have so far?
I think 20, which honestly isn't that much. My thing right now is that I don't know what all the Korok puzzles are. Like there's one that I found that I know it's a Korok puzzle, but I don't know how to do it. So I've got it marked, and I'm going to come back to it. I don't know how to do it.
I haven't come across any Koroks or puzzles or anything that I haven't figured out how to do yet. They've all been the really simple stuff that were already in Breath of the Wild. Well, there's one type of Korok puzzle that's actually new to Tears of the Kingdom, which is reuniting a pair of them so that you get 2 Korok seeds at once. I've done a couple of those, but I haven't done anything else that was new.
There are at least 2 new ones. There was one on the Great Sky Island that I found. It was in the cold area, and then there's one on the Great Plateau that I found, and I haven't figured that one out yet.
I know that the snowy area of the Great Sky Island is when I messaged you last night and I said I've done like 97% of what I wanted to before us doing this video. The other 3% was pretty much consolidated to the half of the snowy portion of, you know, the Great Sky Island that I didn't do yet. I didn't explore the other half of that I wanted to, and I'm like, I want to go back and do that. And then there's one other cave that I want to explore over on the other side of it, and then I'm done with the Great Sky Island.
Yeah, I feel so stupid in retrospect. When I was still on the Great Sky Island for the first time, I was in the cold area. I think I just done the last shrine, and I was trying to figure out how to get back. I completely forgot Ascend exists, which is another thing I've been seeing everywhere on Twitter. Everybody forgets that Ascend exists, and there's this kind of like outcropping, kind of near the last shrine that you do.
Yeah.
And I tried to like make this like
outcropping
big,
that looks kind of like a big old tree.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're supposed to use Ascend. I made like this like 15 like log T-shaped thing to like try and get up there with Ultra Hand. I'm like, this is not working. And after I left the Great Sky Island, I realized like, oh, I was supposed to use Ascend there. I haven't had. So funny. There was gliders up there that you used to get back to the Temple of Time. So I'm like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. What? For me with Ascend, I actually haven't had that problem. I've used Ascend a lot so far.
Right.
There are a couple areas where I've forgotten, like when I went into one of the wells, and I was like, how in the world am I supposed to get out of here? And I Googled it. Yeah. And then I was like, oh, wait, I have Ascend. I'm stupid.
Yeah, that was the one time. That happened to me once when I was on the Great Plateau. I won't spoil where I was, but I was on the Great Plateau, and I was in this cave, and I was like, how do I get out of here? I'm like, oh, yeah, Ascend. Duh.
Yeah, exactly. So there's one other cave that I also want to explore on the Great Sky Island, but otherwise I've done everything there, including, when you go back, to where you spawned essentially to get the last shrine. I even explored around there and did a lot of climbing and stuff. And like
caves, caves are important. I don't know what yet because I haven't found the NPC that you can give the bubble crystals to, but they're important for something.
Oh, true. Yeah. I just know when you were saying that, I was like, are you talking about the NPC that you meet in a well that tells you to tell her where all the wells are? Because I just met that person. But
I missed that well. I know there's like
that well might be
there's
right outside the looking landing, or it might be a different spot south of that, closer to where the depths are. I don't remember for sure.
maybe I've been in like 1 or 2 wells, but
I think I've been
not
in
that one, I don't
4
think.
or something like that, just coming
Mm.
across them. But
Right.
Here's a question I want to ask you. What is the part of Tears of the Kingdom that is connecting with you the most? Like, what is just has you the most excited about playing it, like, while you're playing?
Just exploring. I mean, the thing is like, and you know, people have been kind of talking about this too, and we've kind of even touched on it because you touched on the depths earlier. And we'll get into
into
the
that.
depths at some point. Yeah, we'll get into that. But like the game is just like a cake. It has layers, dude.
At least 3. At least 3.
Yeah, but that's like what I've been telling you, is that it like multiplies the play space
Yes,
like
greatly.
like 2 or 3-fold.
What's
Like,
what's
it's
so,
insane.
and we'll touch on this later, but what's so great about the depths specifically is because it's such a different play style, such a different type of
Right.
exploration, and that's what I love
Right.
about
I mean, you're like you
3
can't see.
areas,
You're
yeah.
constantly in danger. I mean, because like the enemies sap your max health. So
Yeah.
I mean, the only way you can restore that is
Like-
either by food, going back to a light route, or leaving entirely.
Yeah, and like the thing that's going to be great about that is being able to really explore the depths later
Well, the
when
thing
you've
is, there's stuff
acquired all of
down
your
there.
hearts.
Like there's stuff down there.
Yeah, I'm
I
sure
won't
there
spoil
is.
how I know that. But there's stuff down there.
I'm sure.
You'll find out what I mean.
Because I pretty much left
when
as
you-
soon as I
when you
was done
explore.
with that quest. I was like, I don't want to come back down here until I have like 8 or 10 hearts, like preferably, because
Well, the thing is, if you go down there and you farm up some pose, go to the statue and look out landing, and you can actually like get some gloom resistant ingredients that you can cook with.
oh,
That makes it a lot better.
that'll be nice. Yeah, because I was gonna say
Yeah,
like
and-
I didn't realize that the enemies inflicted the gloom that leached your max health until I got hit once by an enemy that I didn't even see or didn't even know was aggroed on me. It was just a random arrow. And
Yeah,
it
they're
sapped an
rough.
entire heart, and
You're
I
not
was
ready
like,
for
and that
Oh, God.
scared the heck out of me. I sprinted.
Yeah.
I was freaking
Yeah,
out.
you
I was
can,
using all of my bomb flowers and just,
Yeah.
I was like, get rid of the enemies. I don't want to fight them.
Yeah, you can increase your gloom resistance. There are insects that you can use to give you an innate light effect, so you don't have to use bright bloom seeds. And there's also food that you can use to restore your max health.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, because
If you stock up before you go down there, it's not bad.
fair enough. And I'll eventually get to that point, but for the moment, I was just doing that quest to be able to get the camera and whatever the other thing is you get for the Puripath.
That's what I recommend doing right away, just so you can start working on the compendium.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think it's going to be a similar situation to Breath of the Wild for me. I'm not going to 100% Korok seeds or the compendium. I don't care.
The compendium,
But
I will.
I'll 100% everything.
Korok
else.
seeds, no. Obviously.
Just get enough Korok seeds to fully max your inventory.
Yep.
That's pretty much it. I mean, even the compendium would be like one of those things that's just like, okay, if I come across something new, I'll take the picture and whatnot. But I'm not going to spend the time and energy to find the stuff and take the pictures of everything. Like, no, I'm not going to waste my time.
Right.
Like, I'm already going to spend over 100 or 150 hours in this game. I don't need to waste 30 more just to complete the compendium.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the depths is really interesting. I've got about I think 7 or 8 light routes. They're a lot closer together than towers are.
They're surprisingly close together.
Yeah.
But I mean, it makes sense because they only light a certain radius.
With the light and stuff.
The way they, because the towers give you the map for regions. The light route towers in the depths just have a specific circular radius. So they have to be close enough to allow for the map to show itself. I've only lit the 2 that you do for the quest, but that's it so far.
Yeah, and I've kind of been exploring the same sections of the overworld that I've been exploring down in the depths. Like I'm not kind of going like to new areas in the overworld that I haven't been in the depths. Like once I kind of get a region of the overworld, I kind of go explore that region of the depths.
Oh,
That's kind of what I've been doing.
that's an interesting way to do it.
Yeah,
and speaking of,
I've got most of Central Hyrule unlocked of the depths.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. But speaking of like this exploring aspect, especially where you answered my question saying that was the thing that you had you most excited, that was the thing that I'm surprised about has me so engrossed in this game up to this point so far, because I kind of went into this not necessarily skeptical of if it would be good. I was skeptical of if it would be as magical as Breath of the Wild for me. And this is because we mentioned earlier in this discussion that Breath of the Wild was my first Zelda game, but we didn't touch on the fact that it was essentially my first big game, period. So I mentioned that, I grew up with a Wii and everything like that, and we had, some games on there, but nothing that was like this type of substantial of a game.
Right.
And the Switch was also the very first console that I bought for myself, and as such, Breath of the Wild with its DLC was my first game. Like, it was my first independent type of gaming experience back in 2018. It would have been spring of 2018. Might have been 2019. I don't remember for sure. It was 4 or 5 years ago, however long it was. But Breath of the Wild was so magical for me, but because it's not even just that it was a great game, which it is. It was essentially my first game, and it was my only game for a good period of time.
The first game you bought with your own money.
Yeah, it was that first game for me. It was my first open world game, at least to anywhere near this type of degree. It was and it was pretty much the only game that I owned that I could play like that single player for, minimum 6 months, and it might have even been a year and 6 months, because I don't remember if it was in 2018 or 2019. Like, I just don't remember. But because of that, Breath of the Wild just was so magical to me, and the exploring and just playing the game was so fun. One of my favorite parts was just being able to go anywhere and do whatever, even if I was following side quests and whatnot. Just being able to get distracted and do other stuff in the middle was always one of the best parts of the game. What's shocked me about Tears of the Kingdom up to this point is that it's the exact same thing, except it's new. I have that same magical exploration. Like, when I was replaying Breath of the Wild a couple years ago and doing some of that just for fun, it was still great, but it wasn't the same type of magical because it wasn't new.
Right. I mean, you've explored it already.
Yeah. Tears of the Kingdom is the same thing, but it's also new, especially where the depths and where the Great Sky Island and, all of the Sky Islands, that whenever I get to them, are concerned. It's the same thing, except I'm getting to explore new places, and even the main world is going to be different enough that I'm still excited to explore them again.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, is like you jump down from that first platform after Room of Awakening, you just get that money shot of all these Sky Islands, and like there's some that I don't even know how to get to yet. Like there's this one in the I've got 3 towers so far.
Okay.
And it's in, I think it's in west of Cluda. I think it is. It's pretty high. It's really high up in the air, and I can't get to it. I use I don't know how many rockets, like seven or eight rockets, trying to take one of those floating cubes up into the air. I got close, but I couldn't quite get there. And those cubes eventually despawn after so long. So yeah.
Yeah, meanwhile,
some of the islands are really hard to get to.
I was trying to use recall on a couple of the falling blocks, and they don't get me far enough yet.
Yeah, there some of those, there's some of the blocks they'll actually fall off the islands, and some won't. They'll kind of just be kind of in open air.
Yeah.
And you can just kind of use them just kind of to get to an island. But those really, really high islands, I'm not sure about those. I'm not really sure how to get to those yet.
Yeah,
because there's one, you've probably seen it. It's right near Lookout Landing, but it's super high in the air. And there's another one that I've been to. It's a lot lower. That one I have gotten to. I assume it's the same thing. It's nothing we can access. We can do anything with right now. But it's I don't know. It's crazy that some of these islands are so high in the air. We can't access them right now.
And that's actually something that I kind of want to get into, is the interesting dichotomy between the overworld and even the depths to an extent between either one of those and the Sky Islands above in
Mhm.
how they're designed, and specifically how they're designed with the abilities in mind.
Mhm.
Because I think the biggest drawback of the abilities in Breath of the Wild, despite how good and fun they were, is they were designed with very curated puzzles in mind, or puzzles
Yeah.
were curated for those designs.
Yeah.
This is why I liked all of the non-combat shrines, or most of them, because it was fun to figure out how to use those the way that they were intended to be used to solve a specific puzzle.
Mhm.
Even if some of them were rather complex or confusing, it was fun to be able to do that. But most of those just generally did not have a whole ton of utility outside of those puzzle areas or outside of shrines. So if you were just
Right.
exploring the main world, most of those abilities like Magnesis or Cryonis just didn't serve a purpose in 99% of the overworld until
Mhm.
you came
Try
across a
us a
specific
little
puzzle.
bit just for getting across water. But that's
Yeah,
really it.
and that was
Maybe
pretty
like
much,
like drudging up a chest, maybe.
yeah. And even Magnesis was like that. It was mostly for, looking around if you came across water, like turn it on to see if there's a chest.
Is there anything pink?
Yeah. Is anything glowing, And
Right.
but outside of those types of things, like stasis had a lot of utility in combat because you could
Yeah.
actually
Once
use
you
it to
upgrade it, you
stop
can use it
stuff.
on enemies.
Yeah, and that was nice, but generally speaking, the abilities in Breath of the Wild weren't super. They weren't usable outside of puzzles for
Didn't
the
have a whole
most
lot of
part.
utility.
Yeah, these abilities are so much better because not
Mhm.
only are they amazing for curated spaces, which I think is what the Sky Islands are meant to be, is relatively curated spaces for these as kind of large puzzle area sandboxes rather than
Mhm.
shrines.
Like smaller, kind of smaller scale sandboxes as opposed to the surface.
Yes. So they're kind of in between a puzzle area like a shrine and the big surface. You just have the Sky Islands that are kind of in between. So they're
Mhm.
curated to be, used and explored a specific way, but still have the open sandbox for you. So they're
Right.
useful for those. They're useful on the surface for just a lot of stuff, just whatever you want to do. Also, due to having a bunch of building materials everywhere, but also
Right.
they're also very useful in these specifically curated locations like shrines. So they're
Right.
just
And that's
overall
the other thing
better.
about the surface is that there are no Zonai devices on the surface that I know of.
Oh yeah,
Other than the dispensers, like the dispensers exist on the surface, but there aren't just like random Zonai devices lying around.
yeah.
Um, there are on the Sky Islands, which is nice because you absolutely need them to get to some of the Sky Islands.
And you need them to get from place to place in Sky Islands, as
Yeah.
even just the Great Sky Island, the tutorial area showed you. Like,
Yep.
just to be able to get to all of the shrines, you had to utilize the Zonai devices, or you didn't have to, but it was greatly encouraged,
Yeah, I mean they're sets of Sky Islands where they're far enough apart where you have to like use a rocket or a fan or something to get from one to the other.
Yeah. And like, I just think it's so genius the way that they designed these abilities because they are so usable that way. They're
Hmm.
just more broadly usable, which is
Also,
refreshing.
one other thing I'll mention: I've been playing for like 20 hours. I still don't have all the Donut devices yet.
I sure I don't.
Yeah, I mean I'm sorely missing the steering wheel. Unfortunately, I really want that so I can actually control my vehicles. I don't have it yet.
Oh, true. I've come across several steering wheels at random spots on the
Yeah, I
overworld,
have
but
two, but I can't
I
spawn
don't.
any.
Yeah, I don't have any like that. And I haven't actually used any of my stuff like that. The little exploring that I've done in the overworld so far, I haven't built anything to move around
Hmm.
yet. Because I didn't. I was more concerned last night with getting through essentially the tutorial and then the tutorial-ish type of portion of the, of the surface. Just those first few quests before the world
Right,
actually opens. I was concerned with
right.
doing that first, so now I have
Yeah,
the
yes.
ability to do more.
Yes. So was I. I was trying to knock that out first thing because the game really much kind of points you in that direction.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, especially with some of those abilities as well, it's like you wouldn't be able to get very far super easily if you didn't get through at least up to the depths quest. Like,
yeah, right. Yeah,
it's
right
heavily
now I'm kind
encouraged to
of
do that.
I'm trying to plan like a little bit and not be completely aimless. I'm trying to like go for a Great Fairy because at least the one that I found, Great Fairies have like quests involved to open them up.
Hmm.
And so I'm
Rather
trying
than
to
just
work my
paying
way.
them exorbitant amounts of rupees.
Yeah, rather than just paying them money. They have quests involved.
My
And
power is diminished.
yeah. I mentioned this in our DMs, but the one that I found has you going like halfway across the map. So I'm trying to get over there to that stable, and I need to go over there for other reasons anyway because the NPCs that you can give bubble crystals to are apparently also there. So,
Oh, really?
yep.
Okay. Yeah, I've come across one stable so far, and that's actually where I decided to save and quit last night. But
yeah, stables are good for rumors. The NPCs there tell you about lots of stuff in other parts of the
yeah,
world.
which is kind of the strange thing actually about how the quests work in this game as opposed to Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, if you heard any of those rumors, those came up as rumor quests, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't come across any of those rumors in this game that go into my log as rumored quests or anything like that. They're just things that are just like, oh, this is obviously a rumor for something somewhere else in the world, but the side quest
so
obviously
there's
doesn't
some
unlock
stuff,
until I go
there's
there.
some stuff that's like unmarked
Yeah. And
that you kind of just have to either take a picture of or remember.
yeah, and I'm like
there have been
okay.
a few things here and there that have been unmarked.
Like that stable that I just mentioned that I went to, like I talked to one NPC and it was very clearly supposed to be a rumor quest where I needed to go to a specific location down south to do this quest, but it doesn't mark itself as a quest, I guess, until I get to that location and actually unlock the quest or whatever it is, whatever it is I have to do. And I'm like, that's gonna be a pain in my butt as a completionist. But
yeah, I mean,
speaking,
there's I have a decent handful of shrine quests. I've done I think 2 shrine quests which have been the same concept. I don't know if there's like if every shrine quest is different like it was in Breath of the Wild, if they're all the same. The 2 that I've done so far have basically been identical. And then I've got like a handful of side quests. There's like one other section of the adventure that I don't have unlocked, I think, if I recall correctly.
I think I have
quest, side quest, shrine quest, memories, and like there's one other section I don't have.
I think there's 2 of those that I don't have unlocked because I have the main quests section, I have the side adventures, and then side quests.
That's probably what is side adventures.
Yeah, because I came across one side adventure while I was going to the depths. I talked to people and they said that Captain Hawes was going to raid an enemy encampment with some people.
Yeah.
So I went and did that, and it unlocked itself as a side adventure.
Right. Yeah, I haven't done anything with the monster forces yet. I think that's like a whole. I think it's like a whole chain of.
I think it's a whole quest line because I did the first one, and basically what Hawes said was like, okay, we're heading to Nikluda next. That's where the next one that we're going to hit is, and so that's a mark on my map now is the next one of those. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not entirely sure where I'm going yet. I was actually heading east when I got off last night, heading towards whatever the sea people's name is. I forgot what they're called. Zora. I was heading vaguely in that direction because that's the direction I always go to in Breath of the Wild. So I've been going over there just to try to get a couple of those towers open.
Right.
But otherwise, I'm not sure if I have a direction now. Which is
my first dungeon is probably going to be the Rito dungeon.
I'm not sure what I think
I've got an order. I think I've got an order in my head. I think it's probably going to be either Rito, Goron, Zora, Gerudo, or Rito, Zora, Goron, Gerudo.
I was like, Gerudo's probably going to be my last one.
I've heard that the bosses of the either Thunder or Lightning Temple, whichever it's called, is the hardest.
Which would be consistent with Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm not that surprised.
Yeah, and that was actually probably my least favorite of the bosses in Breath of the Wild was the Lightning Ganon or whatever he was called. Thunderblight Ganon. Yeah, I was not.
He was my favorite because he was the hardest, and he actually, you have to block and parry his attacks.
Yeah, like he was interesting in that way. He was probably the most interesting of the 4 aspects, but I just hated the the lightning call attacks where you had to use the magnesis and actually grab like the stakes or whatever, and all
Yeah,
of that
that
stuff.
was.
It was way too clunky, especially in that dungeon.
hmm
The sort
Yeah,
of
the environment.
cylindrical environment
Yeah, the
it was
environment kind
terrible.
of, and those kind of upper platforms don't really allow for that.
Yeah,
Kind of get in the way.
it was annoying at best. So I
hmm
never really enjoyed his fight particularly, but that make long story short, yeah, I definitely believe that whatever that boss is and the Grudo area is going to be the hardest. I would believe it. Be consistent.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the dungeons and the bosses because I've heard that they're better.
Oh, that's good at least, because I mean, I didn't have an issue with any of the divine beasts. I thought they were really fun and interesting for the most part. But I don't have experience with previous Zelda dungeons, which everybody says are really iconic.
Well, yeah,
One of the
that's the
things
thing,
about Zelda
and
that
we'll
people
talk
love.
about this more in future discussions when we've actually done the dungeons. But that's kind of my thing about the divine beasts is that I like that they're non-linear. I don't like the fact that they're all visually and audibly non-distinct from one another. Because if you took a
Yeah,
screenshot of one, you wouldn't be able to tell which one you're in. They all look the same.
unless you spent so much time in one because it was not working.
Right.
Ironically enough, the Gerudo uh, divine beast was a pain in my butt.
Yeah.
For no reason at all. Even the second time that I went and did it, and my second playthrough, I still had to look up guides to figure out how to do parts of it because I just could not remember or figure it out.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad that the dungeons and the dungeon bosses are hopefully going to be a lot better. That's probably my biggest issue with Breath of the Wild.
And that is fair. I
Is the
think that's
dungeons and the
most
dungeons.
people's generally biggest issues is something
Mm-hmm.
to do with the dungeons / divine beasts / shrines
Shrines I like
and the bosses.
Yeah, and like that's the thing is like I like the divine beasts as a concept. Like it's cool that there are these huge robotic monsters walking around the overworld you can see from like halfway across the map, right?
That are just
Like
kind of doing their own thing that you have to get
yeah,
under
like
control.
if you're not looking at Death Mountain at the right time, you'll completely miss Valordania. And if you are, you'll see them like coming around the mountain. You're just like, what the heck is that?
Yeah,
That's
or
kind of everybody's like first reaction.
or just all of the rain and Zora area, because that's one of my most favorite memories from Breath of the Wild specifically is going through that. When I
Mhm.
started doing my playthrough, I immediately went to do that again because I just loved it so much. Just the
Yeah,
whole,
Ruto
you
was
know,
my first dungeon too.
yeah, just
Breath
going
of the Wild.
through all of the area, just trying to reach the Zora through the rain
Mhm.
because you can't climb. Like,
Right.
such a genius way to do that. It was great, but
Yeah, and thankfully Tears of the Kingdom has like rain resistant elixirs, which is good.
that'll be
Yes,
pretty
that's
nice.
nice. Yeah, that's nice.
Anything to make climbing less of a headache in that rainforesty area to the southwest or southeast,
Yeah.
sorry. Is
Yeah.
trying to get around anywhere in that place was a nightmare because it was raining 9 times out of 10.
And also I assume that place is still great because durians are probably there and durians are OP.
Yeah, durians are wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I found some hardy radishes and a couple hardy truffles, and I made like one dish that was like it was like plus 13 hearts. Um,
Wow.
I can't remember where I was. I think I may have been in the depths. Um, and I got like my health shredded in like 2 hits. Like all those temporary hearts were gone. I'm like, oh well, so much for that.
Yeah, I haven't made anything with temporary hearts yet. Most of the food that I've made was on the Great Sky Island because I was making cold resistant food.
hmm
It's like as soon as I saw that there was a portion of the island that was snowy, I was like, okay, I know what to do here now. Get
Yep.
my spicy peppers and my meat and put like
Yep.
4 peppers and 1 meat in, and I have like 12 minutes of resistant. Boom.
Yeah, the max amount of meals is lower than I thought it'd be. It's I think it's about the same as Breath of the Wild. Maybe it's actually lower. I didn't count, but yeah, there's a cap.
Oh, and apparently in here you can actually track recipes now, which is
Well, you could do that before.
I
But
I
think
never noticed it in Breath of the
it
Wild.
it didn't bring them all up at once.
Yeah.
Like if like in Tears of the Kingdom, like you can access recipes, and I think it'll tell you like everything that you ever made with
Yes.
that material. I think is the way it works.
Well, that and there's a way to check the recipes so that you can actually look through all of the recipes that you've cooked or made or unlocked or whatever. So I have
Okay.
already like 12 or 15 of those, and one of those numbers is like, and even stuff just like toasty mushrooms or something counts as quote unquote a recipe. So there's like
Right.
hundreds of these recipes, and I'm like, there's another thing that Gerard the completionist is going to hate. He's going to have to
Yeah.
collect all of the seeds and complete the compendium and make every single meal. And oh my
Oh, yeah.
goodness.
If anybody will do it, he will.
Yeah, and he won't be happy
Honestly,
about it.
honestly, because of the Sky Islands, I would bet there's more than 900 core seeds.
I sure hope not. Or if there is, I hope they actually utilize them.
Well, I mean that's
Allow
the thing.
us to
Like,
max out our
technically-
inventory with all of the seeds. Like, let us have 50 weapons.
I mean, technically, like, it's actually there being more is a good thing because that means they'll find them more often.
Yeah.
So that means they're more densely packed, and it's possible that because like the way the menu works, it scrolls down now instead of having pages. So like it's theoretically possible that our inventory can be bigger than Breath of the Wild. I mean, who knows? I mean, I haven't found history yet.
Genuinely hope so, because even in Breath of the Wild, like even with the max inventory, it still sometimes felt rough. Like if you were in Hyrule Castle specifically, you just tear through every weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since the durability and stuff seems to be less here. Like you need to find combination of weapons and items with fuse and stuff that make durability really good. Otherwise, you're just shredding through everything.
Well, I know durability modifiers still exist, but you don't start finding those till I think probably later in the game because I don't think I have anything with a modifier right now. Well, that's not true. Well, I think like certain weapons might just have an innate modifier. I'm not sure.
I would have no idea.
Certain weapons that I have do have like quick charge and stuff like that. So.
Oh, gotcha.
Sure.
So certain like perks on them.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And like certain weapons have like special effects.
I think that's the other thing.
A lot of the weapons from like the original game that are like now decayed and have like less attack power. There are some that like do more damage, like when they're about to break or when you have like one heart or something like that.
I would never combat with one heart. I freak out if I have to. I wonder if they have changed a little bit of the mechanic with like all of the shrines and like the blessings and stuff like that to the degree that you can get max endurance and HP this time instead of one or the other.
I think you can because there are more shrines in Tears of the Kingdom than there are Breath of the Wild. So I think so.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, my summer is going to be destroyed. How am I going to play Final Fantasy 16 if I'm still 100%ing Tears of the Kingdom?
You don't.
Pain.
You put it off.
Dude, I'm putting off my real life for this, and that's scary because I don't have time to be putting off. Even though I want to. I already played 9 hours of the game yesterday, and I was like, okay, well, I gotta watch myself, or this is going to be a problem.
Yeah, that's why I took this week off.
Because like as is, I'm not going to be able to play again until Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, because like I'm overdue for a vacation anyway, so I'm like, I'm taking a week off, and I'm just gonna get lost in Hyrule.
I want to do that, but I can't at the moment for reasons that I'm not going to say in the podcast. But either way, like I think the main thing that I'm having a problem with in Tears of the Kingdom up to this point now is I've played enough games since playing Breath of the Wild that the combat actually irks me. I'm not a huge fan of the combat system. Like the way that dodges and parries and stuff work, it's not polished enough. It just feels
I don't
too
dislike it. I don't dislike it, but basically nothing has been changed.
Yeah, which is
they basically just copy and pasted it, which kind of sucks because they could have improved them on it.
Yeah, it could have been better. I mean, it's not a bad combat system. It's just a very serviceable system.
It's arguably Zelda's best combat system. The only combat that would probably rival it, I would argue, is probably Twilight Princess. And that's because of the abilities you get.
The main problem that I have with it is that it's just not polished or designed in a way that is coherent with most modern combat philosophies. And when I say that, I mean, like, I've played games like God of War and FromSoft games and stuff that feel very much you're rewarded by spending time with the combat sandbox. Right. In Tears of the Kingdom, the combat sandbox has mostly to do with how you fuse your arrows. Like, that's pretty much the most fun and interesting part, and that's pretty much the only aspect of it that I feel like is actually enjoyable, because I'm going through and trying to find pieces that'll give me an advantage in the combat, rather than just straight up fighting things, and I just want to straight up fight things. But that's not what these games are for, but I wish they had that aspect, you know?
Right. Yeah, the combat is obviously part of the game, but it's not the
not at all
focus.
And I wish it was at least more of a focus, because for me, like, just holding the ZL for a focus rather than having a target
toggle.
Lock. Yeah, a toggle target
and, like,
lock.
That's one thing I don't like about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, because past games have done that, and it's not in either game, which is frustrating to me as someone who's played all the other 3D Zeldas.
Yeah, it's just the focus mechanic
and doesn't
ZL.
like a hold to lock on.
Yeah. And it's also rough because even the dodging and parry mechanics are very mediocre compared to what they could be.
Yeah, I mean, the windows are basically copy and pasted. I mean, the Flurry Rush window is super loose still.
Yeah, it's super loose, but still somehow I mess it up every time because I'm used to those types of windows being later in the animation. Most games, the animations are closer to when it's actually coming to hit you rather than, before the swing starts, it feels like.
Right, yeah, it's funny. I tend to dodge early and I tend to block late a lot of times.
Yes, yeah. Meanwhile, I tend to dodge very late because I'm trying to dodge, like, when the weapon animation or the attack animation is started, but it hasn't hit you yet. Time to dodge, but no. You have to do it like right when the animation is starting, and for most of those enemies is like a million years before the weapon's going to hit you. It's like some of those enemies, like, say, the constructs at the Great Sky Island, when they're doing the swing the twice with their big arm, and it's like their animation starts when their arm is like back here, but it takes like 2 full seconds before their arm is even here to hit you, and it's like it's so you dodge and you get the flurry rush when the
arm's like back here.
Yeah, when the arm is nowhere near you, and I just find it so funny. Like, it's hilarious, but I just wish it was a little bit more polished. It would make combat more exciting. Because that was the thing with Breath of the Wild, is if I did not have to be in a combat situation, I did not do combat ever. And I think it's going to be the exact same thing here.
Right. Yeah. One thing I'll mention. I kind of want to talk about this, but I didn't really know when to bring it up. I've been like, I'm the type of person where, like, I know, like, there are areas of the game I shouldn't go to, but I want to go there anyway. So I've been, like, morbidly curious about Hyrule Castle.
Oh no.
No.
What nightmare scenario have you managed to
it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. This is what I was doing for a couple hours last night.
This is what you mentioned in DMs.
I launched myself out of the Lookout Landing Tower, and I made it to Hyrule Castle. Hyrule Castle is actually safe.
Really?
There's not a whole lot there. There's some weapons and a few enemies, but it's mostly kind of barren and it's safe. However, as far as I'm aware, Hyrule Castle Chasm is endgame.
That would make sense. Yeah. Considering that's where Mr. Mummy Guy resided.
I went down there, got my ass kicked, and I'm fairly certain I made it to the final boss. I didn't fight him, obviously. Yeah, I didn't fight him obviously when I activated the cutscene. I'm like, oh god, quit to home screen.
Oh
Yeah, but
no.
I was just curious if you could actually fight the final boss whenever
Yeah,
you
I mean,
wanted.
it
I'm
would be
fairly certain
consistent
you
with
can.
Breath of the Wild too. Like,
Yeah, I'm fairly
just plow
certain you
through.
can.
Wow, that's.
Yeah,
I mean, that would make sense. Like, Hyrule Chasm would be like, that would definitely make sense to be endgame. That's
yeah.
where everything starts,
So
and like we haven't even talked about the intro in this discussion yet. And
no.
ooh-wee. When you said
Oh
that
boy.
intro was fire with 2 flame
That
emojis,
intro was fire.
yeah, you said that intro was fire or whatever with 2 flame emojis, and that was an understatement. Like, what are you doing, man?
Oh, that's the thing. Like, is we've known about Mummydorf like since the first trailer, which is like back in the what 2019.
Yeah, I know that.
We didn't have full context. Like, the dude talks.
Yeah. The thing was because so this is also a little bit of a difference between Josh and I for this release cycle. Anyways, Josh has watched plenty of the stuff related to the game coming out.
I've watched all the trailers and I've seen some of the preview footage. I was kind of worried about watching the preview footage based on what they show. I didn't watch the Treehouse because I looked at Treehouse, like the description of it, and it said that it was gonna like show stuff that wasn't publicly available, so I avoided it. I watched some reviews prior to release. That's pretty much it. Other than that, I'm like, as blind as possible, pretty much.
Comparatively,
I saw some light gameplay spoilers, but that was pretty much it.
okay, yeah, and comparatively, I had a little bit of a different approach. So I saw the original teaser that these guys released back in 2019, right? So the one that originally showed Ganondorf, and Josh, I'm pretty sure you just sent this to me, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's Ganondorf. I don't know anything about this guy, but it's not a giant pig boar thing that dies in 2 smacks. Like,
Yeah.
But what was so interesting is I haven't watched any of the trailers directly since then. Basically all that I've watched related to Tears of the Kingdom before starting to play the game was I watched whatever footage of it came up on Skill Up's This Week in Video Games. So whenever like information came out, if he showed portions of a trailer, that's what I saw. But I never like directly watched a trailer personally. I watched Skill Up's hands-on preview that he did a few weeks ago, and then I watched Skill Up's review. That's all of the coverage of this game that I've watched in any way, shape, or form. So the intro was coming in as kind of a surprise for me, and basically everything was. So like, I wasn't surprised on the depths like I could have been because I decided to watch that part of Skill Up's review because I live dangerously sometimes. But like,
I mean, the thing
I'm relatively blind.
The thing is, the depths for me is I didn't realize it was literally the size of like the overworld.
Yeah. I mean, because that's what was so interesting. I was like, well, if I didn't watch that part of the review, would I really be that surprised by it? Because all of these people are mentioning it. Like, it's mentioned a dozen times before you go into it, you know?
Right.
But I obviously don't know for sure because when I went to actually go in there, I had watched that part of Skillup's review, and he straight up says it's the size of the overworld, and I was like, oh, okay. And then when I went down there for the first time, I was like, I believe it.
Yeah,
and it'll be cool. I think exploring the depths will be my favorite part of the game.
Oh, and that's the thing. Like I told you, like there's stuff down there that I know about. I just haven't gotten to yet. Like there's this one NPC that like I won't spoil where they are because you're gonna find them. They're in a kind of they're in a landmark, a very important landmark, I'll say.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll find them at some point. But
Watch
they told me to go. They told me to go to like this specific area in the depths and then come back. Like they didn't tell me. Like they said they'd give me something if I went there. And I have no idea where it is. I think they gave me like a name and like I may have like a general kind of vague idea where it is. But I haven't found it yet. So yeah, and there's more stuff than that down there. There's I mean, I won't spoil it. I'll let you figure it out for yourself. There's stuff on the Sky Islands that you can get that'll point you to more stuff in the depths, I'll say.
That would make sense. Yeah. I mean, even up to this point, And one of the other things that we actually haven't talked about as well that I think was super enticing based off of just the Great Sky Island and so far on, in Hyrule is the story and the lore, I think, is going to be a little bit more directly interesting.
There's a fair amount of lore. Well, not a fair amount, but there's some lore bits that I've already seen that are really interesting.
Yeah. Like, even I'm just really interested in how the Zonai fits in with all this. It was kind of a similar question as Breath of the Wild with the Sheikah, but
well, I mean that's the thing. It's like the Sheikah weren't a new race.
Yeah, they were
like the Sheikah have been around since at least Ocarina of Time, if not A Link to the Past, if I recall correctly. But the Zonai are new.
Yeah,
new race.
Yeah, and that's the other thing as well. Is, even the Sheikah in Breath of the Wild, I think as well, was just kind of digging up the remnants of this civilization.
Right.
So it was just kind of that sort of trope. And a lot of the story and whatnot was relegated to memories specifically because Link didn't have any. And because Link was asleep for 100 years and nobody knew Link. That one of the things that has really been refreshing for me playing this so far is that you talk to an NPC, especially in, Central Hyrule, you go to Lookout Landing or anything like that, you talk to anybody, they know you're Link, they know you, they're familiar with you. They know that you're the swordsman. So, like, it's not like... it's not like maybe there's a handful of people or, like a random Zora or something who's like 100 years old and is like, oh, I do know you, or you knew.
And everybody knows you. Yeah.
Now everybody knows you, and that inherently is just different. But it's also the way that I think cutscenes play into it as well, because even meeting Pura had a little mini cutscene with it. In Breath of the Wild, there were basically no cutscenes except for the memories that I can remember. Or major
the memories were voice acted. There were like a couple tidbits of like the dungeon lead ups that were voice acted. I know like after you beat the dungeon, there were some voice acted bits for the champions. But there was a lot less voice acting in Breath of the Wild.
I feel like there was
a lot more in Tears of the Kingdom.
There was just as much, if not more, of the voice acted or story related cutscene stuff in Breath of the Wild's DLC as there was in just the main game, because the DLC had the Champions Ballad, so there was a fair amount of the story, of those characters related in that. Tears of the Kingdom definitely has a lot more direct cutscenes, like just going through, even like comparing the Great Sky Island versus the Great Plateau. The Great Plateau, when you're talking to, the mysterious NPC the entire time while you're getting your powers and stuff, there's no cutscenes there except for when you meet him at the top of that church,
right?
And he reveals himself. Like that's the only cutscene that I can remember from the tutorial of that game specifically. Versus Tears of the Kingdom, where the tutorial you're talking to Rauru in the cutscenes several times, every shrine when you enter and stuff like that. And
I mean, there's several where he's voice acted.
Yeah, and
also, by the way, speaking of Rauru, that is a recurring name in Zelda. It's not the first time.
Oh, interesting.
It's a different Rauru from past games, but it's a recurring name throughout the series.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
It's not the first time a character has been named Rauru.
I was like, if it was the same Rauru as was in a past game, that means that there's something going on lore-wise with this Rauru to be associated with the new Zonai. But
I mean,
I was about to formulate a whole theory.
I'm not gonna spoil the story yet. I mean, again, we'll talk about this when you see more memories. I'm only seeing 2, but I mean, there's some lore implications going on.
I mean, I'm really just interested to see how this goes. Even though I don't like the way that Link's hand looks, I really thought that all of that, the way that the intro just played out was so neat. I just thought it was epic, and even the way that it affects all the weapons. Like you go anywhere in Central Hyrule, and all of the weapons are just tarnished.
Decayed.
Yeah, and like. Oh, it's such an interesting mechanic. It gives a reason for having to fuse stuff. Like,
and that's what's cool about it is like, even though those weapons, like they have less attack power, they usually have some other kind of trade-off that makes them worth it.
Yeah. And it's just so interesting. But in regards to the intro itself, I was surprised at how long it went on.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good 20 minutes.
It's a lot of anticipation.
Yeah, I mean that's the cool thing about it is like the music builds and it gets faster. And you're
Dude,
like, oh
the
God, what's
music
happening?
is so creepy. I love it.
Right.
It was
great.
so, like I just was in a state of disquiet the entire time that I was going through that intro sequence. I was like,
I mean,
Zelda,
that's the
hold
thing.
my
Like,
hand.
that's the thing. It's like it's hard not to like walk because like if you move at a pace any faster than walking, like you get ahead of Zelda. So it's like hard not to walk.
Yeah, and
And the
part of
whole
me was
time
just
it's
like
just like,
looking at everything. I was just the fact that I was in a new Zelda game that looked like Breath of the Wild. I was like, it was pretty much how I was behaving, but it was just the cutscene and stuff. It was just so good. I thought that a little bit of Zelda's dialogue felt awkward, just in terms of the writing of it. But
yeah, she seems to be better voice acted from what I've heard.
her voice,
her accent isn't quite so forced.
I would agree with that. Like the way she sounds is fine. The actual writing of her dialogue itself, for whatever reason, at least half the lines in the intro slightly felt off to me, and I don't know why. I think it's just the fact that Link is a non-talkative protagonist.
Maybe.
So that probably has a lot to do with it. But man, Mummy Ganondorf, Mummydorf. Oh, that was so creepy. I mean, it was beautiful. Even just seeing him with,
I mean, that's the thing though, is that we don't see him in Breath of the Wild. And Age of Calamity, I assume we don't see him in Age of Calamity. I haven't finished it, but I assume he's not in that one. But like he's theoretically been there for like hundreds of years if he's like
theoretically. Yeah, especially and I'll touch on the specific thought that I'm thinking of in a minute, but it was just the fact that like seeing Mummydorf creeped me out. Dude, the movement decisions, and I said this in DMs more than once, I was freaked out. Like, oh my goodness, they did this cutscene so beautifully perfect. It was amazing. Like, I was just so hype. And then of course, all of the actual corruption and destroying the Master Sword. Brilliant way to get rid of the Master Sword, by the way, for this game, as opposed to Breath of the Wild, where it's just that you woke up after 100 years and you have to get it.
I was expecting that we keep it and that it was going to be like a really low power unbreakable weapon, but like I used it on that first construct you fight on the Great Sky Island and it broke and it didn't recharge.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah, exactly the same here. Because I was using it to like cut grass and stuff.
And I'm very curious. I'm very curious how we get it back.
Yeah, especially
again,
since
like not gonna spoil story, but I know about Zelda's predicament. Let's say.
Okay, I was gonna say, I was like, because all I know is that we gave the Master Sword into the light and it transferred itself to Zelda. Like that's all that I know about it, and
I know Zelda's situation. So it's going to be interesting how we get the Master Sword back.
Yeah, that's what's going to be interesting as well too, is the fact that we saw Zelda at Hyrule when you meet Captain Hawes.
I am very suspicious about that.
I am as well. That really confuses. It doesn't confuse me. It has me thinking along two different wavelengths, right? Like two different options in which I see it being. Is I'm not going to go into the actual theories themselves, but it makes you wonder how much of an active role Zelda's actually going to have in this game compared to say Breath of the Wild, where she did not exist except for memories. Like so if there's any form of Zelda actually taking an active role in the story, that would be pretty nice, but I guess we'll kind of see what happens.
I mean, based on the trailers, it seems possible, but we also don't know how much of that was memories.
Yeah, we don't know how much was memories or how much is endgame.
Right.
So, who knows? But yeah. Now, what was the other thing that I was going to say specifically? I forget. Whatever point that I said like
it'll
5 minutes ago. It'll come back eventually. Yeah, that intro I just thought was really effective. Even like Breath of the Wild's intro was very good for what it was doing.
Yeah.
Because it's just a random voice saying Link, until you
Right.
wake
I mean, the
up.
thing is, like, for the original game, it was good, but like as a sequel, I think the intro needed more meat,
Yeah,
which we
yeah,
got obviously.
yeah, for sure. Oh, and yeah, that's actually the point that I was going to make. Is based off of the things that I've seen in the surface so far. Is it seems like Tears of the Kingdom is legitimately a sequel to Breath of the Wild, even in terms of story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
I don't know exactly how long it takes, but it takes after, but it's like a couple of years, I think.
yeah, I was like, it can't be more than a half dozen years after.
Hmm.
Because and what really clued me in on this was because part of me was wondering if this was just going to be like a another distant jump, or if it was just going to be an alternate world or whatever, if it
Hmm.
was still Hyrule but a different type of Hyrule,
Right.
just with the same map.
Hmm.
So I guess alternate universe, to put it simply. I was wondering
Right.
what it was going to
Like
be like,
a
but
Majora's Mask situation.
yeah, but the main thing that clued me into the fact that that was not what it was doing was when you see the one headstone type of thing. In Central Hyrule, I found one where I read the inscription and it was Zelda saying like, "This is to all of those who, in memory of those lost in the Great Calamity," or whatever it was. And I was like, okay, so
I don't
this,
think I found that.
yeah, I saw it somewhere. I think it's in Central Hyrule Field or something like that, somewhere random. I don't even remember specifically what it said. The main thing was like there was that, and then like a couple other clues, um, that just kind of made me think like this must just be a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, which I guess I wasn't
Yeah, it is.
expecting. Yeah, and I'm actually really interested to see how those things kind of tie together, because there's no way that this game doesn't include some sort of reference to a lot of that stuff. But
Mhm.
it is nice that Mummy Dwarf will be in the game, compared to just the Great Calamity, because even just Ganondorf's
Gigantic swirling cloud pig boar.
thing, whatever. Yeah. The main thing that I think personally is of interest where that's concerned is the fact that, like you said, presumably Ganondorf has been just kind of there under Hyrule for who knows how long, hundreds of
Hmm.
years, whatever it was. Um, and I feel like just that in and of itself kind of has lore implications retroactively on Breath of the Wild, which I think are fun to look at, or
Yeah,
would be
and
fun to look
I
at.
don't know. It's kind of interesting how the game with Ganondorf was the sequel and not the original. Like I kind of expected it to be the other way around.
Yeah, like you could
In retrospect.
makes you wonder if, say, Ganondorf's, power, what he was doing in Breath of the Wild was he became the Calamity Ganon, and it was kind of a disconnected, you know,
Yeah, I
aspect
mean,
trying to destroy
in
Hyrule because he
yeah,
couldn't where he was.
mhm. Yeah, in retrospect, I kind of think that's what that's what it was. Kind of, and looking at the whole duology, I kind of think that's what it was.
Yeah, especially with the gloom aspect, because now the gloom's
Hmm.
seeping up and it infects people. It's making people sick who go near it, and that's why
Hmm.
Zelda and Link are investigating. So it makes you wonder, okay, was the whole Calamity Ganon thing just Ganondorf trying to do something with power that he couldn't otherwise use how he was? So then he was using the gloom as a way to make people investigate, and now he's actually able to escape, I guess. Uh,
Hmm.
so it has things that, even though Breath of the Wild's story wasn't super in depth, it makes the real time story of Breath of the Wild, I think, have a little bit more depth to it, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with the memories. And you'll see when you actually get one. Because the first memory is pretty early on. It's not very far away from Central Hyrule. Um, um, but you'll see they handle it slightly differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I kind of hope so, because that was the thing, was when you mentioned kind of offhand on Friday or Saturday or whatever, and you mentioned memories, and I was like, and also Skillup's review, when he said that the story was largely handled the same as Breath of the Wild, and I was thinking about that. I was like, well, especially now that I've started, because obviously everything's more real time. You're not waking up 100 years later.
Hmm.
I was like, well, how are they going to do a sort of memory type of aspect, or include that sort of side of a story, especially for this type of game, because that's really the only way that they could do it to fully allow for the
You'll-
sandbox the same way, but also make it feel like the memories aren't quite the same as Breath of the Wild, where it was just, okay, here's a memory of you and Zelda from 100 years ago. Now you know more about yourself, I guess.
Yeah, you'll see when you get your first one what I'm talking about. I've heard that it's a better balance, but you know we'll see when I get to the dungeons, and whatever story there could be beyond the dungeons, because like who knows if there's like some story that crops up after you finish the dungeon or finish all the dungeons or what have you. Who knows?
Yeah. And it makes you wonder if they decided to just include more story in the game as well, because a lot of the story of Breath of the Wild was also in the Champions Ballad as a DLC.
Right.
So it makes you wonder if they're doing anything like that with this game. I have a sneaking suspicion
I
not.
fully expect DLC.
Like, I expect DLC, but I don't know if it'd be the same type of story or DLC that the Champions Ballad was, for example, because that was just
I mean,
more
it's
memories.
it's hard to tell right now.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, we're still early on. I'm only 9
I
hours
mean,
in.
once you have a full picture of the story, then maybe we'll be able to make a better call. But who knows?
Yeah,
Of course,
for sure.
by the time we finish the game, the DLC may be announced. So who knows?
It better not be out, that's for sure.
I mean, because they announced the Breath of the Wild DLC pretty soon after the game came out.
Yeah, I felt like it was
If I recall
really
correctly.
soon.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like,
because like
didn't
the
it come out
the
like
first
6
wave
months later?
announced something like that. Yeah, the first wave was like 3 that summer, and like the second wave was like that winter. So yeah,
Whatever they decide to do, I'm just hoping that I have time to do it. And speaking of time, yeah, I gotta start getting ready for other stuff. So I think we talked about most everything that we needed to get through in this.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised we actually didn't run out of time, or not run out of time, but ran out of things to talk about. I should say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was wondering if we were gonna go into more like speculative stuff based off of past games and whatnot, because you mentioned that you might discuss random stuff from past games, but
Well, I mean
as
that
is.
was mostly kind of like comparing
Yeah,
like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, like as an original game and a sequel to say Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, where this is like a direct sequel. Where
yeah,
in terms of plot, Majora's Mask is a direct sequel, but the actual plot of Majora's Mask doesn't have anything to do with Ocarina of Time, and it's in a separate world. If that makes sense.
yeah. So it's like,
The setup for Majora's Mask plays off Ocarina of Time. Like it makes more sense if you play it first, but other than that, the plot is entirely disconnected.
yeah, versus this is just a duology.
Right.
Will it be a more perfect duology than Dad of War? We'll find out in about 200 hours of playtime. So with that being said,
Find out next time.
yeah, find out next time. And with that being said, not sure when we're going to do more of these discussions or how frequently we'll be able to do it. Really depends on when I'll have the ability to play more, because Josh will be continuing to plow through a ton of stuff this week as he is off work. Meanwhile, I still have a lot of other stuff going on this month. Pain. But that is going to be the end of this discussion in this podcast episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you did, I'll probably include something at the end of this video saying some sort of approximate time we might have another episode come out, but it who knows. I'm just kind of playing this everything on the second channel is just being kind of played by ear. So thank you guys for watching. We will be back in the next discussion whenever that is. Bye.